Welcome, beautiful people of all ages, shapes, and colors, to another episode of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, where we encourage you to stick to the basics. I'm one of your co-hosts, TV, aka TV on Basketball, alongside my other co-host, Jay, aka the Knockdown Jay. How's it going, my guy?
TV, the NBA offseason has officially started, and man, are we off to a hot start already. I wasn't expecting this.
I was not expecting this before the draft. This crazy trade that we're obviously going to be talking about in today's episode. We're going to get all over that. And of course, we're going to be talking about the NBA draft, which is happening this Thursday, which by the time you listen to this, it's going to be happening tomorrow night. So there's going to be a lot of discussion on that. And of course, we're going to finish off with the draft and quiz. As we always do, it's going to be another fantastic episode. But we have to do some housekeeping before we get into the episode. Remember to follow our personal socials at the Knockdown J, at TV on Basketball, down in the description below. You can find our links over there. In terms of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, remember to follow us on TikTok and Instagram for the best NBA content. If you're on YouTube, remember to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you will not miss an episode. We're gonna be pumping out episodes once, potentially twice a week throughout the entire summer, so you don't want to miss out on any of those. And then in terms of any of the podcast networks, Spotify, or Apple, just so you support in any way possible, subscribe, leave a review, all that good stuff. Jay, you ready to get into some basketball talk?
Yes, sir. Let's go. Let's go. First episode post-finals, man. It feels weird.
Yeah, but the NBA is never short of surprises, never short of news to talk about, because Bradley Beal has finally, and yes, I am putting that in emphasis, finally gone trade from the Washington Wizards after years of staying in that purgatory over there in Washington. He has been traded to the Phoenix Suns in exchange for Chris Paul, Landry Shamet, whatever handful of second round picks means, and a number of pick swaps, which we just for some reason just never get the exact amount. But Jay, crazy trade. Bradley Beal, he had to waive his no trade clause for this to happen. Give me your trade grade. Let's start first with the Phoenix Suns. What do you give this trade grade for them?
Man, so for the Phoenix Suns, I've had to ponder this one for a little while because you have to factor in the on-the-court play as opposed to the financial expenses of all of it. Once I kind of sat down, I heard a couple of different opinions because I'm not going to lie, I could not go at this one alone. This was one of those where I definitely had to reach from a couple of different sources and kind of get a couple of different perspectives on it. I am going to give the Phoenix Suns a cool B. I'm going to give them a cool B. And I feel like it might be a little bit higher than consensus, but I also think that there's a lot of different ways to look at this depending on which angle you're coming from. If you're looking at this from a financial standpoint, they have put themselves in a pretty difficult predicament here in terms of their financial mobility moving forward, right? And now that they've also moved on from a ton of second round picks, I think the next available draft pick they can even trade is all the way out in like 2030 or something crazy like that in terms of a first round draft pick that's available to move. So there's not a lot of flexibility in terms of being able to make other additions outside of using the veteran minimum now that they've got three dudes that are making a ton of money. And that's not even counting DeAndre Ayton, who in a weird way may be a lot more safe on this team than we think. I think that's still up for question because it depends on just how much this team is going to value depth as opposed to just being extremely top-heavy talent. Because from that perspective, we're talking about top-heavy talent and star power, they're probably top 2, top 3 in the league from that perspective. But once you put the whole body of work together, that's where things get a little dicey. I think the part that makes it where I'm a little bit more optimistic about them is you have to think about what they gave up. Chris Paul is, 38 years old, going on 39 years old. As a guy that TV, we had the initial conversation. This was a dude they were going to waive for salary cap flexibility, right?
Yeah.
You move on from a guy who's in Landry Shamet, who was in your rotation and did serve a purpose to an extent, but also just continuously found ways to get baptized by Aaron Gordon. So maybe as a team that is going to potentially have to run into the Denver Nuggets in the postseason, maybe Landry Shamet isn't your favorite guy to have on the opposite side of the court as Aaron Gordon as well. So that's another guy that ends up getting moved on from. And hey, look, whether you like it or not, James Jones has said it himself. We don't pay attention to the NBA draft. Now, look, as me and TV here, we're NBA aficionados, so we enjoy the NBA draft. We might
Yeah.
not know every single draft pick in the mix. We might not know every single prospect, but it's one of those things that we stay engaged for. James Jones, he just shows up there so he doesn't get fined. As you know
Yes.
what I mean? He just shows up to make sure he's available, but he doesn't really care about draft picks. We
Yeah.
said this beforehand. So moving off of a bunch of seconds, it's not too crazy. And
Yeah.
when you really think about it too, what was the alternative? Bring back Chris Paul, end up giving him a guaranteed or at least a partially guaranteed 30 million. You have the taxpayers mid-level to maybe go pick at some middling free agents in a free agency class that really isn't that great anyway, to the point that like Adrian Wojnarowski, shout out Woj, said that after Kyle Kuzma declined his option, he might be one of the top guys on the market. Kyle Kuzma might be one of the top
Yeah.
dudes in the free agency market this summer, and that's what I'm saving my taxpayer mid-level for if I'm the Suns. And no, it seemed like of all the options that they had in terms of being able to improve in any kind of real way, this actually might have been the most viable one. So despite the fact that they're stupid expensive, they still have the flexibility of moving DeAndre Ayton to be able to pile on depth. They clearly have a ton of space for guys who might want to come there if they want playing time, because dudes are gonna get playing time for this team
Yes.
with the kind of depth they need. So playing on the veteran minimum, there's gonna be a ton of guys looking for playing time and are gonna be able to get it with Phoenix. And in an era where, or I guess a new era that we're moving towards with the new CBA, me and TV discussed this on a past episode, with the new CBA being nicknamed the Super Team Killer, you beat it a year early before it really kicks
Yes.
in. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yeah.
So there's a lot to like about it, despite the fact that the money makes it kind of nasty.
Yeah. DeMarcus Cousins, you over there in Puerto Rico? You're gonna be a Phoenix Sun next year, my guy. Because man, they are gonna need to call up some old names, man. Tyreek Evans, you haven't played in the NBA. You want to play on the Phoenix Suns? Come over here, man. Dwight Howard, forget trying to recruit people to Taiwan. Come back to the NBA. But for real
Yeah.
though, I mean, look, I'm giving this an A. Just
Oh,
Chris
okay.
Paul was a goner. Chris Paul was a goner. He's gonna get waived, and you flipped a potential waive, getting nothing in return, to Bradley Beal. Like, yeah, the second round picks, yes, the money, but in terms of what Chris Paul was gonna end up being, which was nothing at the end of the day, you brought back an all NBA level, like a few years ago, an all NBA level guard, a multiple time All Star. You have Bradley Beal as your third option. Really, if you like just really thinking about it, KD, Kevin, Devin Booker, and now Bradley Beal is your third option. It's great. Does this address any of their issues? Hell no. Depth, nothing has been solved. Defense, nothing has been solved. But it's better than having Chris Paul at the moment. And Landry Shamet was just collateral at this point, just because you have to make the contracts work. But bringing in Bradley Beal for what it was worth. You weren't going to trade Chris Paul for the depth. You weren't going to trade Chris Paul for like a key piece to help in your defensive end. Just get a better version that can produce, not someone who was a shell of his former self, someone who could not stay healthy at the end of the playoff run. Bradley Beal is going to be on the floor. He's going to give you still 20 to 25 points per game, even as a third option. He is still someone who is only 30 years old. He is in his prime. Now it's paying $50 million, something that you want to do like 4 years from now, especially because apparently the no trade clause is still a thing in his contract. So even if he's like on the Phoenix Suns, he gets to choose where he has to go. That's going to be a problem. But at the end of the day, you traded someone who you're going to let go anyways into a perennial all-star. This is a massive win for the Phoenix Suns. Now, in terms of the depth in the defense, I still don't know what's going to happen with that. DeAndre Ayton, in my opinion, you say that he's like safe on this team. I think this just means that the smart thing for the Suns to do here is take DeAndre Ayton and turn him into like two or three players. Because at this point, you don't need. I don't think DeAndre Ayton wants to be the fourth fiddle on this team. He doesn't want to be the fourth option, nor does he like want to like try and like have. He doesn't have like that defensive mentality. He doesn't really have that like bang sort of inside mentality that the Phoenix Suns need. I would be comfortable. I know this sounds bad, but this is what the Phoenix Suns have to come to. I wouldn't mind starting Jock Landale at the start of the season, and then maybe just trading DeAndre Ayton for just some like nice role players just to fill out the team, just so you have like actual depth, actual like defensive, like some sort of defensive identity. Because as much as DeAndre Ayton has kind of disappointed the last couple of years or hasn't really lived up to the hype, there's still teams are going to be invested in a 24-year-old center, so who's like a former number 1 overall pick. So there's going to be something there. At the end of the day, this trade is a big win for the Phoenix Suns just because of what's transpiring on Chris Paul anyway. You weren't gonna bring him back 100%, and to be able to only trade to get Bradley Beal at the end of it is a massive win. So yeah, the Phoenix Suns absolutely won this trade, and transition to the Wizards. I mean, Beal absolutely screwed them over.
Yeah. So okay. So like, let's stay on Phoenix for a second
Yeah,
because I know
yeah,
we
sure.
obviously have to move to the Wizards as well. But I want to address a couple of points
Yes,
because if we wouldn't be doing this segment is due diligence if not only did we play devil's advocate but really break this down front to back.
yeah,
Now the DeAndre Ayton element I think is huge because again he is a big facilitator to how they may be able to expound upon their depth in a way that fundamentally makes them better in terms of being able to acquire a lot of players under a similar salary as what DeAndre is getting as another hefty contract on Phoenix's
yeah,
books right now. Obviously, being able to grab more wings would be big. And another thing that's kind of huge when you talk about the not the buyout market, the veteran minimum area is that getting viable bigs isn't necessarily the hardest thing in the world to do.
yeah,
I actually think it would be hilarious if the Brooklyn Nets re-engaged with the Phoenix Suns because they're a team that has a surplus of wings. Dorian
yeah.
Finney-Smith, Royce O'Neal. Like there's still plenty of dudes on that team that are at the wing position that are a little bit older that kind of fit more of the bill of what Phoenix needs. While outside of Nicholas Claxton, the realistically, the Brooklyn Nets really don't have a ton of moldable talent at the big man spot. So, ironically enough, calling Brooklyn up again might be an interesting play. But I think the part why I said that DeAndre Ayton might be safe actually has more to do with the signing of the hiring of Frank Vogel than it does anything, right? Frank Vogel has a track record of doing well and developing big men over time dating back to his time with Indiana with Roy Hibbert, for example. So not only having a new voice in the room, which is something big, because remember, DeAndre Ayton's biggest issue this last season was his engagement, right? And his interaction with Monty Williams as his head coach beforehand. Having a new voice in the room, but also having a guy who has a history of developing bigs, it might be a little good sign for him. But then you also have the other end of the spectrum, like you mentioned beforehand, where maybe the depth matters a lot more in a league where we just saw the Denver Nuggets win off of having an all-time superstar, two all-star caliber guys, and a lot of dudes who fit around the skill set. Now, TV, I'm going to ask the devil's advocate question. I'm going to ask you the devil's advocate question first, and then I'll answer it myself. For those people who go, oh, but doesn't this just look like the Brooklyn Nets situation all over again with Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving? TV, to something like that, what would your retort be to that kind of statement? Where I would say, I don't necessarily think that anyone who says that is wrong, but I also would argue that I don't necessarily think that's bad. But how do you feel about it?
No, for the most part, I think that they're right in the sense where um, like they have that in Bradley Beal, like they have all their eggs and they literally traded every single pick. They
Mhm.
traded every single pick swap. They've traded every single like basically all the second round picks they had possible. They are going in for this big three. The difference between the Brooklyn Nets and this team is that they have a piece there in DeAndre Ayton, which can mitigate some of the other messes. And I think as much as I like the point you mentioned. Frank Vogel does good with these type of bigs. It, at this point, you need like three role players instead of having one DeAndre Ayton. Just might be the move. I just think that thing that's just too valuable. I've seen what just honestly the teams that we just saw in the finals with both the Miami Heat and the Denver Nuggets. This feels like a move where they're still trying to hold on to that super team big three era when the league is going into another direction where winning is predicated on not just having a superstar guy and just having all-star level like really good, also just really good role players around them. It's going back into that old direction. At least with this one, they could still be mitigate, like they could still like mitigate the issues. I just think that yes, DeAndre Ayton could still like play a good role in your team. It's just that there's nothing that he's shown you over these last 4 or 5 years that has given you like much hope for that. Yes, maybe a new voice will help, but at the end of the day, even if he does get better, which is a possibility, I just think that you need some like role players in this league. You need some role players. Those are the guys who win you games around the edges. I just think it's imperative for them to just make the trade anyway, and I think that's what really the difference is between this Phoenix Suns team and the Brooklyn Nets team. They didn't have the other guy to trade for. They are like, okay, we invested all in this big three. We have a bunch of really young guys and people like Claxton, Day'Ron Sharp, and just a bunch of guys we signed on the minimum in terms of Patty Mills, DeAndre Jordan, all those other guys when they first assembled the team. So at the end of the day, I just think that the Suns have that extra X factor in DeAndre Ayton as a trade piece, and I think that they have to use it. They just have to use it.
I think that's a great point. I think the fact that Phoenix still has an out in a certain kind of way to continue to build around the big three in a way that the Brooklyn Nets did not when they had theirs is a huge thing to factor in when comparing those two teams. But TV, I would even argue just from a play style standpoint, I think a lot of people would say, hey, that team flamed out. The most we saw with them was losing to the Milwaukee Bucks. But guess what? When those three guys played, they were one of the greatest offensive groups we've ever seen in NBA history. As Zach Lowe always says, the greatest hypothetical team we've ever seen in NBA history, right? With James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant. So I think by comparing the two teams in a way that makes it sound as though that's an insult is actually being kind of disingenuous, because when that team was clicking, when that team was healthy, when that team did not have off the court drama incorporated, that team was scary good, and a lot of us were picking them as a potential team to represent the Eastern Conference in the championship. And again, we hate to burst Kevin Durant's bubble with this one by hanging this over his head, but if it weren't for the size 17, we might be having a completely different conversation about that Brooklyn Nets team altogether, right?
Yeah.
So that's just so how weird history kind of plays out just by one little thing playing differently than how it originally went. I think another thing to take into consideration is that I think when you think about that Brooklyn Nets team with that big three, you still think drama. You think drama, 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 and that being one of the biggest things that plagued the opportunity that was the potential of that team. When you think about this new big three, there's not really any drama associated with it. Devin Booker, Hooper. Kevin Durant, Hooper. Bradley Beal, Hooper. They're just guys who kind of go out, drop 25 plus a game, and go back home knowing that they either took the dub or they got to come back and be better because they took an L, and they move on accordingly. This team doesn't come with as much baggage in terms of
100%.
off the court issues.
100%.
Now health wise, they all have a little something we got to be worried about. That includes Bradley Beal. If you remember last season, he only played about 50 games due to injury last year. Now, granted, I also think the Wizards knew they weren't going to be all that good, so some of that might have been a little bit gassed. But nonetheless, all three of these guys have had their fair share of little injury bugs here and there. And as a top-heavy team, similar to when they had Chris Paul, maybe not as risk-averse as when having Chris Paul, but similar to when having Chris Paul, if any of these three guys go down, it does put them in a little bit of predicament when you're worried about the kind of depth they're going to have. So it's going to be interesting to see, A, what kind of guys flock to Phoenix, understanding that playing time is available and that they are a team that has championship aspirations. What do they do with DeAndre Ayton? And if that does end up being used to get any depth? And the third thing is, where does Frank Vogel's defensive mentality play into all of this, considering that this is so far kind of built more like a Mike D'Antoni team, low key?
Get him as an offensive coach. Get him as an offensive coordinator. Get him as some sort of associate head coach. That would be fantastic for this team. Actually, would be great.
Yeah, man. So I think there's a lot of things that have to be taken into consideration, but I don't like the fact that a handful of people, I don't want to say a lot of people, a handful of people have utilized this comparison to the Brooklyn Nets team of yesteryear as some kind of negative connotation. I actually think there's a lot of positives to pull from it. I think the one thing I will say is probably the most impactful comparison is I don't think anybody in this group is as good of a passer as James Harden is.
Yeah.
I think that'll probably be the most noteworthy thing. But I also think that this is a perfect opportunity to have Devin Booker more on ball. And we saw last season with Chris Paul out, when Phoenix went through Devin Booker as the lead primary initiator, they were almost, I think most of the time statistically, they were much better offensively when Devin Booker ran the show at the point guard position. So having him next to Bradley Beal with Kevin Durant, dude, look at it this way. Defensively,
Yeah.
the point guard assignment is always going to go to Devin Booker. Then your next best defender is probably going to be on Kevin Durant. That means the third best guy
Yeah.
defensively on the perimeter is going up against Bradley Beal,
Yeah.
who is one of the better off-ball movers in the NBA, and he's one of the better three-point shooters in the NBA. Don't let the last 2 seasons feel like make you feel differently about him. This has been a guy who's probably been more on ball and had more attention on him in the last 2 to 3 years than he's ever had in his career. Back in 2018, 2019, the dude was a 38,
Yeah.
39% knockdown shooter from beyond the arc. Why? Because he had John Wall and other guys like that offensively to create space for him. Well, you ain't never going to get any more space than what you're about to get this upcoming
Yes.
season. So there's a world where next season Bradley Beal is shooting somewhere between 39 and 41% from the
Yeah.
three-point line, just out of the fact that he's never going to get looks as clean as what he's about to get playing in an offense like this one. So there's a lot of ways where this team maybe is not as good as what that hypothetical Nets team was, but I think there's a lot of elements that could still make them relatively on par. And if you take the drama out,
Yeah. No.
jeez.
I mean, all three of these guys combined don't have as big of a as big of an ego as Kyrie. So
Nope.
I think that's also another thing to look at. The drama's a big thing. The drama is absolutely something that's going to be completely different with this team. And at the end of the day, I think like even with like some people are kind of questioning the fit, like where's Bradley Beal going to play? He's going to fit absolutely perfect. I
He's
think
gonna play the two. He's gonna play the two like he normally does.
yeah,
Devin Booker's gonna be more on ball than he's ever been. Each of those guys, despite not being high assist guys, are all good playmakers. They are just going to be in a position now where they might have to play make more than they're used to. But I think
yeah,
on a team like this, where they're going to try to outgun you, they've got three of the better gunners in the NBA.
yeah.
So I feel pretty safe saying offensively, they're stepping into the ring and feeling confident against anybody court wise that they're gonna go up against.
Yeah, 100%. It's again, it's all about also what's put around them. They're gonna have to figure that out. But if your starting base is these three guys, sure they're making a lot of money. It should be very effective come next season, 100%. Before we move on and talk about Chris Paul and where he's gonna go next, let's give a quick grade on the Wizards. Anything like they got fleeced. They absolutely got fleeced.
Yeah, man. I honestly D minus. I think most people would give them as. I'll go D minus. Um, because there's still a chance that they can flip Chris Paul. There's
Yeah,
still a world where instead of waiving Chris Paul, they're able to facilitate a trade. We'll talk about different places where we think Chris Paul may end up, but there's a world where they could facilitate a trade to still gain some other assets that might not be as good as what we would have expected when moving off of Bradley Beal, but still be able to get something relatively good out of this year, on top of the fact that, of course, they are going into the NBA draft on Thursday with the 8th overall pick. Ironically, they're always around 8 or 9. So hopefully they can just really reach on somebody who's good. And for once, they can reach more on potential as opposed to grabbing somebody like a Corey Kispert or a Rui Hachimura or a Denny Avdia, the way they've done in the past 3 seasons, with this anticipation of still going for the playoffs. This will be the first time this will be the first time in a long time that the Wizards will be drafting more for upside than instant gratification. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see, because they're going to have to really engage in this rebuild. Like, they're starting from ground zero.
yeah,
So who they take with this 8th overall pick is the first real building block of what they plan on doing moving forward with all of this.
yeah, 100%. But I'm gonna have to give him the same D minus. I guess you get off the big contract.
Yeah.
But man, my only thoughts on this on the Wizards side of things is that no one should be getting no one's gonna be getting a no trade clause anytime soon.
Facts. 2 years too late. We can also say that 2
Yeah,
years too late, definitely, because I think even Wizards fans were clamoring
yeah,
about 2 seasons ago or
yeah,
starting the free Brad
yeah,
chance of like moving on. But I'll say this: shout out to Michael Winger,
yeah,
the new president of basketball operations with the Wizards. This dude said he was empowered by Tommy Shepard to come in, and if he felt like a rebuild was on the table, he has been empowered to go in and do so. He did not waste any time.
they picked a direction. I'm happy they picked a direction.
And that's
Yeah,
thank you, TV. And that's exactly where I was going to go with it. That's,
direction.
man, as a Bulls fan, this hurts me because seeing other teams figure out themselves, it just makes you wonder if you had a competent front office the way I wish the Bulls did sometimes,
Yeah,
and you pick a lane, it clarifies so much more for you
yeah,
in what you plan on doing moving forward and makes your decision making that much easier. The Bulls are falling into the opposite trap. The Portland Trailblazers, who we'll talk about a little
yeah,
bit later, are in a similar predicament
yeah,
as we speak. And now I think the Wizards, the Orlando Magic were a perfect example of this a couple seasons ago before they
yeah,
dumped off Aaron Gordon, Nikola Vucevic, and I believe it was like there was a couple of other guys who fell into that lane. But they pretty much got rid of everybody.
yeah,
And they chose a direction. They get Paulo Banchero, they get Franz Wagner. Of course, they get our 11th pick
yeah,
in this draft. They get Wendell Carter,
yeah,
and now they're really building something. And they look like a team that could be scary in the East 2 seasons from now, or even a season from now, right?
yeah,
So when you pick a direction, not only does it make you feel better about your moves moving forward as a franchise, but now it gives your fans something to clinch on, as
yeah.
opposed to going in feeling blind or feeling overzealous about a season that inevitably is not going to be as good as it sounds at the press conference.
Yeah. The only thing is about this, I mean, I agree with everything you just said. But yes, I'm happy they picked a direction. But Bradley Beal screwed them over for the next 10 years. You could have easily, if this no trade cost would have happened, they would have got some sort of haul in terms of
Facts,
first round picks, pick swaps, all that type of stuff. Some sort of young player. Bradley Beal's no trade clause made it so he only chose the Suns.
bro.
The Suns, who gave away all their picks in the KD trade, could only give second round picks and pick swaps. He absolutely screwed them over. He screwed Washington basketball for the next 10 years because he I wouldn't say he like ran away from the grind, but he like flipped 180 so quickly.
Yeah,
He,
W agent though, like
you know,
for real.
huge, yeah, yeah, big W from the agent for letting the Suns give away basically nothing and be having like KD and Devin Booker as your new teammates. Great job, Bradley Beal. But
For
at the end of the
real.
day, the Washington Wizards, they what's great about at least the Magic rebuild, the Thunder rebuild, is that they have a treasure chest of picks.
Yeah.
The Wizards have none of that.
But they have their own, and they're
They
going to
have
be
their
bad
own.
for a while. So that's a bright side. Like I said, this eighth overall pick is going to be a big time builder. That if they bring back Kristaps Porzingis and flip him, there's still potential there. They're going to free up a lot of money if they're not able to strike a new deal with Kyle Kuzma. There's some stuff there if they want to start getting really engaged as a seller in this market where there's not going to be a ton of great free agents. They could be a pretty solid seller with a couple of guys they got. Monty Morris, bring back Kristaps Porzingis, flip him. You've got a couple of interesting guys on the roster that if you really wanted to kind of go full sell mode, they could do some stuff. They're
Yeah,
still kind of stuck, and Bradley Beal definitely kind of stuck them in the heart with this no trade clause because it definitely facilitated them getting the worst package that they could get, honestly.
yes,
But I don't think it's completely over for the Wizards in terms of
not
like
over.
their future moving forward, but they definitely this is you know when they say in football trade a guy a year
Yeah,
too early rather than a year too late. Well, this is a perfect example of why.
yeah,
This is a perfect case study as to why you jump on it before as opposed to jump on it too late.
yeah. And this might be the end of no trade clauses. If after all and after NBA teams see what happened with Bradley Beal,
Facts.
what incentive do they have of doing this? What
Yeah.
incentive? They don't. They need the management wants control. They had no control over the situation, and honestly, I'm glad they moved off of it. They chose a direction, but man, Bradley Beal screwed them the hell over, and that's why this rebuild's off to kind of a rocky start there in Washington. But the person we're going to talk about next was included in this trade, Chris Paul.
Yeah.
Chris Paul was on this flight going to Good Morning America when he got notified that he was getting traded to the Washington Wizards. It feels like he's not going to be on the roster next year. I'm Jay. Which team do you think we'll see Chris Paul day one of the NBA season next year?
Ooh, that's tough. Now, first of all, can we just talk about how ironic it is that like the Washington Wizards are the best middleman in the NBA. First of all, we need to get that out the way, bro. The Washington Wizards are the best plug in the NBA. They
Yeah.
have single-handedly in 3 back-to-back seasons, 3 to 4 back-to-back seasons, accepted the worst contract at the point guard position possible.
Westbrook.
John Wall, in terms of being able
John,
to facilitate a
yeah.
trade, moving John Wall, and then now getting $30 million worth of Chris Paul.
Which became guaranteed in this trade, by the way. This is no partial
Exactly.
guarantee anymore, so he's guaranteed now. So yeah.
So a $30 million Chris Paul and as an expiring contract, Russell Westbrook 2 seasons ago, and moving off of John Wall, who was arguably the worst point guard contract, maybe arguably one of the worst contracts overall in the NBA a few seasons prior. Washington, W middleman, bro, because
Yeah.
they are not scared to take the big contracts or move or be the team that helps move the big contracts. So W middleman, but in terms of Chris Paul, it's only 2 places he's gonna go, bro. He's either gonna go to the Clippers or he's gonna go to the Lakers. I think it's really that simple. I think the question is which one is willing to put up the most. Now, I think the Lakers overall probably have the best package potential, maybe, but at the end of the day, especially when you look at future situation, but I also think that the Clippers are in a tough situation in terms of what they've got going on. So especially because I don't think they're going to be willing to give up Terrence Mann as a part of a trade for that, which I wouldn't blame them for, by the way. So I really think it's going to be those 2 teams bidding against each other. I think you can make the argument that Boston is like a weird wild card. I've heard Milwaukee has been brought up in conversation as another good team in the running, but I really think at the end of the day it's going to come down to one of the 2 LA squads, and whichever team has the better offer, that's going to be the team that they move with. I definitely don't think the Wizards are just going to waive him. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I don't think that with the kind of compensation they got back from the Bradley Beal trade, that they can also just sit there and let that be dead salary where they just waive him. I don't think they can afford that.
No, they're not. They're gonna trade it to one of these 2 teams. It's gonna be one of these 2 teams. Again, I agree with you. I don't see any other kind of like scenario where Chris Paul isn't there. This feels like 10 years too late, especially with the whole like Lakers trying to trade for him in 2011 or whatever.
Yeah.
But that could still definitely happen. Both teams need a point guard. It's just, again, whoever has the most assets. I do believe, again, it is the Lakers. I don't know what the package would look like. But at the end of the day, I think it's what I think actually no. I think it's had to do something like what I saw was like Malik Beasley and like Mo Bamba or something as was enough to get the trade done. So, and maybe some whatever picks, because that's what the Wizards need. But at the end of the day, he's gonna end up going to just 2 teams. If I'm him, I'd prefer the Lakers just because although both duos, like both the duo of Kawhi and Paul George have their injury issues, same thing with LeBron and AD, I kind of just trust that more in the Lakers system. So I would just like, if I'm Chris Paul, I'd rather have the Lakers gig. But at the end of the day, I think both teams could really use him. And if the Clippers bring back Russell Westbrook somehow on a minimum contract, that's a nice, at least like both these guys can at least, like if Chris Paul does have to miss some games, you have these okay point guard depth there in Russell Westbrook. So either way, I think he's just going to end up on an LA team. You're completely right. Man, but it's tough because if you saw that Good Morning America segment, like Michael Strahan was basically just laughing in this man's face after explaining like how sad the whole situation was. He was basically just clowning him the whole time. But hopefully Chris Paul can like find his grounding, and hopefully he's still contending, because I mean, he's done it before with the Oklahoma City Thunder, trying to take some like middling team to the playoffs. If he could do this with Kuzma, and if they somehow bring back Kuzma and Porzingis and think that this team is going to make the playoffs, and he somehow does it again, you know what? This guy deserves to be like enshrined in like Wizards memorial if he's able to be able to do that. So Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see, but yeah, he's definitely not gonna be on the Wizards roster by day one. Jay, let's move on to the next topic. We talked about this trade for quite a bit, but man, this week is only gonna get better because the NBA draft is happening tomorrow, man. It is absolutely happening tomorrow. And there are a lot of storylines, but none bigger than the third overall pick. For months, it's been discussed. Are they going to go all in with Damian Lillard? Are they going to try and do this third overall pick, which could potentially be Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller? Or are they going to keep the pick, trade Damian Lillard, do all this type of stuff, and try and like rebuild finally after trying to hold on to this Damian Lillard wagon for the last 10 years? Jay, what should they do? Draft a player, draft a Scooter Brandon Miller, or is it time for them to trade Dame?
I think this is how I look at it, bro. I think those things are compounded. I think if they make the pick, they're trading Dame. If they make the pick and Scoot is the pick, oh, you gotta trade Dame. I think at that point you have to. If you look at your backcourt already as it's set up, Damian Lillard, Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, and oh my gosh, I'm forgetting my man's name. Shaden Sharp is the other one. Who has a lot of upside his own of in his own right as well. You're going to not only do you well, I mean Shaden Sharp's a little bit bigger, but not only do you have a ton of smaller size point guards, but you also have a pretty hefty guard group. And also, especially if you take Scoot, if you take a guy that high and you take him at this position, at the same position as the guy in question, that is an indication that you've made a decision,
Yeah.
right? So I think those things go hand in hand. I think the bigger question is, do they make the pick or do they trade the pick? I think that's the bigger decision. I think that's the bigger decision
Yeah.
because I think if they make the pick, they have inadvertently said they basically inadvertently said, Dame, we are not moving you tonight, but we're moving you soon.
Yeah.
If they don't make the pick and they trade it in order to acquire one of these all-star caliber players, of course, the big name that's been coming up a ton is Zion Williamson. Maybe we could talk about that in a little bit. But like that's a guy who's been brought up, or Brandon Ingram, for example. Those are a handful of dudes.
Siakam as well. Yeah.
Pascal has came up. I think Jalen Brown has been brought up not only
Yeah.
as a potential trade for the third overall pick, but Jalen Brown has also been brought up as a potential trade for Dame.
Yeah.
So that's its own little interesting nugget in there as well. But I think that's the question, TV, is if you're the Portland Trailblazers front office, do you use what is probably your best opportunity in quite a long time to give yourself a viable out to say, we have the third overall pick. We cannot pass up on potential generational talent at the point guard position in Scoot Henderson. And if there was any time to move off of Damian Lillard in terms of being able to move into our rebuild, literally, if not, like Bobby Marks said on ESPN, if not now, when? There
Yeah.
is no other time really better than now.
Yeah.
Or in the flip side, you may never have a pick this valuable. Maybe you do, consider how stacked the West is and isn't,
Exactly.
right? But you, especially when you talk about how top heavy this draft is, where it's a 2 to 3 player, maybe 4 player draft in a lot of people's eyes, you may not have a draft pick this valuable ever again, or maybe in the immediate future, right? So this is also one of the best potential dangling pieces that Portland will ever have in recent memory to be able to go out and get a co-star or to go build upon some depth with some real serious pieces. So if you're Portland, is it time to hit the reset and you make the draft pick, or do you use the draft pick to facilitate a trade to get Dame some help?
Yeah. The funny thing is, I think there's a third option.
What do you think the
This
third
this
option is? I'm intrigued.
this is most will be the most Portland Trailblazer thing ever.
Okay.
Scoot Henderson gets drafted to the Charlotte Hornets. They've been longing for a small forward for years on this team. Brandon Miller falls to their lap. They convince Dame. Brandon Miller is that guy. He's got next. We have Anthony Simons, Shaden Sharp. Now we have your wing. We don't have to give anything up. We can still have our depth. Jeremy Grant, we can bring him back. Yusuf Nurkic. Trust us. Brandon Miller is that guy. He will be your co-star. That would be the most Portland Trailblazer thing ever.
It's like you're right though, but like TV, Dame's seen this movie before. Wesley Matthews, Nicholas Batum, Al Farouk Aminu. TV, Al Farouk
Has any of them had the
Aminu.
same hype as a Brandon Miller, though?
I
A guy
think
with
you're.
that star potential? Like,
I
I'm
think
not
you're
saying I agree with
right
this.
though.
Mind you, I don't think I'm saying I'm agree with this. I'm just saying that this could be what the Portland Trailblazers are thinking. If Brandon Miller drops to them at number 3, they needed the wing. That has been their biggest issue for years. You have the guy that you could potentially build like a multiple-time All-Star to pair with Dame, and you can still keep that young core. We talked about this like when we talked about train Dame in the past. 1 foot in, 1 foot out. That has been the Trailblazer mentality for years now. Brandon Miller is the ultimate 1 foot, 1 foot out, 1 foot in, 1 foot out pick. He is the ultimate 1 foot in, 1 foot out pick for the Portland Trailblazers. In reality, it seems like it's real. It makes sense to trade Dame if that's the case. It makes sense to like reset. You have your nice building block piece now. You can get so much for Dame even at this point in his career. But man, Portland has they shown that in any of these years past? No, they haven't. Scoot Henderson, if he's on the board, I say trade. If they pick him up, they're gonna trade Dame. I agree with you there. But if Brandon Miller's available, this could get a whole lot more interesting.
TV, I think you're making a crazy point, and it's so much validity behind it that's a great point that I guess I didn't even really consider was if like it sounds so easy to say like if it's Scoot because the whole LaMelo thing with
Yeah.
Charlotte, some people believe
Yeah.
that he and Scoot could coexist. Others would say that the wing position is probably a little bit more of need. He's more NBA ready,
Yeah.
which they need as many blue chippers as they can get because they just need flat out talent that'll
Yeah.
hit. And Brandon Miller definitely just has upside to be like Otto Porter, like how Otto Porter was when he initially was drafted out of Georgetown. He was a guy that just instantly fit. And if you take the injuries out of it, Otto Porter was like an instant hit guy. But Brandon Miller has better upside than even Otto did coming out of Georgetown. So you take the instant fit, bam, you got Brandon Miller. You're good to go. But yeah, if there's a world where Scoot gets taken second and Brandon Miller is left. That also, like you mentioned, though, if there was as much as there's easy out to trade Dame if you get Scoot, there's the easy out to say, we're going to draft you the next big piece, the next big young piece to put next to you. And we can just keep running this course and keep things as they are. No need for change. We can keep doing this
We can keep
all
selling
day long.
tickets.
Yeah. And it's a sick concept because TV, it goes back to what you just said about the Wizards not picking a direction.
Yeah.
And I think just by the fact that this third option you've mentioned is there, although it is an option, it's arguably the most incompetent option as well. Because to me, I view it as if Scoot Henderson is not on the board, I think you commit to Damian Lillard and you trade the third overall pick. I think that is also your version of at least choosing a direction.
Yeah.
I actually think out of all of these, it's hilarious. You're right that that's exactly a Portland thing to do is to take Brandon Miller. But the competent thing to do would be if Brandon Miller is the available guy, that's your indication to say, okay, I choose Dame and we trade the third overall pick in order to put something around Damian Lillard. But you make a great point. Like you also make a great point that likelihood is a lot more matched up with what Portland is to do as opposed to what the right thing is.
Even if they did draft Brandon Miller, I would even like still argue the fact that they should even like trade Damian Lillard in general. But just because like, it's even like something like maybe you can build around Simons, him, Shaden Sharp, that would be still at least a nice young core. And whatever you get back from Damian Lillard would be like a very, very nice return. But man, Portland, man, they don't want to. They haven't like went all in for Damian Lillard just yet, and they haven't completely like went off the Damian Lillard bandwagon. It's a one. It feels like a one way or another direction. Portland's gonna find a way to make it not that. They're gonna find a way.
Dude,
Not
if we come out of tomorrow night's draft and Damian Lillard is still on this team with whoever the third overall pick is, oh my gosh.
it's gonna be crazy.
I don't know.
I if I'm them, if Scoot is there, if Scoot or Brendan was available at 3, take him, trade Dame. That is like would make sense either way.
Yeah.
They want to keep fans in those seats, bro. There's not much going on over there in Portland. Damian Lillard is their best is their best import over there. So they gotta have put some butts in their seat. It's not the confident thing to do, but it's definitely the trailblazer way of potentially doing things. I would if they trading the third overall pick, sure it might not like result in like what you want, but at least that's showing something to Damian Lillard. We're gonna have to wait and see. There's a lot of options on the board. There's the Siakam thing, of course. You mentioned Zion Williamson, Jaylen Brown, a potential possibility. There are definitely some options there for the Portland Trailblazers. This decision is going to be absolutely massive for the direction going forward for the franchise, or just no direction at all, as I mentioned earlier before. Let's move on to another team that is in win now mode, but have a lottery pick as well. The Dallas Mavericks. I'm gonna pose you the question, Jay. On a scale from 1 to 10, they have the 10th overall pick right now. How realistic is it for them to trade this, to draft some to keep that pick?
If 1 is completely unrealistic, crazy, there's no way they're keeping it, it's getting traded. And 10 is, yeah, they're definitely going to make a pick, and it's going to be somebody that hopefully fits their system. I'm at about a 4, leaning in the favor of they're going to move off of this thing. I think realistically speaking, I like Derek Lively out of Duke. He's been a guy that's been mocked to them a ton as a guy that's a rim running center, has a lot of shot blocking opportunity. He's a dude who has a lot of range, and he can be a guy that can just come in and be a defensive anchor for you. Maybe not out the gate, but he can be a guy who can show flashes of being able to do some Nicholas Claxton-esque stuff defensively. I don't necessarily know if he's got it all put together to be like that right now. Because he's still extremely raw as a talent, especially in terms of defensive instincts. But I think there's a lot to work with. He also has a 3 ball that wasn't hyper efficient at Duke, but I think there's some flexibility there that could make him much better as a player if he can get that shot down pat. So I like him as an option if they make the pick. But I just think, especially if the idea is to retain Kyrie Irving, if that is the ideology here, and of course, this is the sucky part about free agency coming after the draft, is because you're making a lot of decisions without really knowing exactly where things are going to lie in terms of, for example, Kyrie Irving is one of the biggest free agent names on the market, and he's the Houston Rockets' third option. The Lakers are a big time target, or a big time team in terms of targeting him. And obviously Dallas has a lot of stake in the situation as well because they already traded draft capital for him.
Yeah.
So, but if the reality is that they have real intentions of pursuing Kyrie Irving and there's mutual interest from Kyrie Irving to return, you got to make that 10 pick. You got to make that 10 pick work, because outside of Luka and Kyrie Irving, they didn't really have a lot working for them this past season. Christian Wood is on his way out. Christian Wood is on his way out from Houston. That's an interesting fit for what they need, ironically. So there's some flexibility there. Do you move the 10th pick for freaking Christian Wood? Probably not. But but Kristaps Porzingis, ironically enough, is also a guy who fits the bill.
Yeah.
The only thing is you wouldn't be able to trade the 10th pick for Kristaps because Kristaps is currently not under contract right now. So you'd have to almost be drafting for the Wizards to then send him later. It's a lot of complications there. But I just think that if you have any real belief that Kyrie Irving is coming back, or that you're going to pursue Kyrie Irving to the highest degree and have the best chance of retaining him, as they do, at least financially, I think, especially when you have to indicate that you still want to be a contender to Luka, you can't make this pick. I know you tanked for it, But I think you needed to tank for it to make it your best asset, not
100%.
not your next building block.
Yeah, and that's why I'm going with a 2. I think that
Two is dang.
it's whether Kyrie stays or not, you're still trying to build a contender around Luka.
True.
You're still trying to do that, and you're trying to make sure you show to Kyrie Irving that you're doing anything possible, whether it's multiple role players, whether it's a third star, whatever it is they're going to do with this 10th overall pick, that it's going to be helping them in the immediate future. You're not waiting on anything. You're not waiting for a development. You're waiting to get the next player to help them now. They indicated that when they traded Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, and anyone and whatever else was involved in the Kyrie Irving trade. This going back on that and making this pick now, it just seems contradictory. This seems way too contradictory to what they were to what the hand that they were showing earlier on in the season at the trade deadline. Whether Kyrie stays or not, you're still a team that is trying to win now, and this 10th overall pick, whoever it is, it's not gonna be helping them in this moment. Even if, like, I've heard reports that someone like Cam Whitmore might be able to, like, fall all the way down there somehow. And I don't even think that's going to be something that would be helpful to Luka or Kyrie at the moment either. So if I'm them, if you already, like, made the point that if you've made the point that you're gonna trade for Kyrie Irving already, and you're gonna try and win now, you can't be like you mentioned, you can't be drafting with the 10th pick. They cannot make a selection here.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of put a bow on it, I think the biggest thing too is that they're in an interesting circumstance, kind of similar to Phoenix. Like, I don't think they're as cap strapped as Phoenix financially, but they have a lot of similar needs in terms of what they even are pursuing in the free agent market, in terms of what they can do with the veteran minimum, in terms of what they need in terms of being able to build a real contender around Luka. A lot of things in terms of a shooting big man, defensive oriented players on the wing. Like, ironically enough, one of the main guys that would be super interesting on this team with Kyrie Irving on the squad is Dorian Finney-Smith, who ironically was already moved in a prior transaction that involved Kyrie Irving itself. So now one of the guys that you honestly could really use on a team like this is one of the probably best glue guy fits for a team now built like this with Kyrie and Luka Doncic. So they have a lot of similar needs as a team like Phoenix. That also makes it where they're going to be in competition with each other for the guys who are going to be willing to sign for the veteran minimum. It's going to be a pretty fun and interesting offseason, because I think that veteran minimum for a lot of these teams that are, like, really in contention is going to be interesting, because it's going to come down to who believes that their team is a real contender. It's going to come down to where do they believe they can get real playing time, how they can fit within a certain system. And there's a lot of teams that fall into that category of, hey, we ain't got a lot of money, but we got a lot of playing time for you. So it's going to be interesting to see how guys deduce where they want to be, considering there's so many teams that are cap strapped and have that same offer of, hey, we don't have a ton of money, but we know we got some playing time for you.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's going to be, like, one of those key storylines to look for going into this offseason. Which guys are going to be able to sign for these contender teams? This is like a storyline every single year with with teams that kind of go all in, try to do the whole super team / big three thing. And now this season it's the Mavericks and the Phoenix Suns. So we're gonna have to wait and see how that all transpires. Jay, before our last topic of the draft, I'm gonna throw it over to you because you are someone who follows the draft more than I do. I'm not very familiar with these guys, and maybe a lot of these other people who, like, listen to the pod don't know too much about the guys coming into the NBA. So we talked about this beforehand, and Jay is going to be talking about some of his favorite prospects that are not going to be that aren't really, like, top 10 talents, or not even, like, going to be drafted in the lottery, and for guys that you should be on the lookout for. Jay, I'm going to throw it over to you. Who are some of those guys that will come tomorrow night these, like, fans should be looking forward to if their team does end up getting them?
Yeah, man. So I kind of went through a couple of different areas. The area that I used to kind of get an idea of who falls where is Tankathon, just to go through the first 14 picks, the guys that are in the lottery. Tankathon has, and guys can follow along. Tankathon's going to update this pretty regularly, but this order has actually been pretty set for a while. But Victor at 1, Scoot at 2, Brandon Miller at 3, Amin Thompson at 4, Cam Whitmore at 5 to Detroit, Osor Thompson at 6, Jarris Walker, Taylor Hendricks, Anthony Black, Derek Lively, Grady Dick, Bilal Coulibaly, Kason Wallace, Kobe Buffkin. Like those are a lot. Those are the projected top 14. I think there's a couple interchangeable names, but ironically enough, these 14 guys have kind of been brought up interchangeably within this area of the lottery. We got a couple of other wild cards here and there, the Leonard Millers, the Nick Smiths, the another guy who didn't like come up throughout this entire thing was, well, Anthony Black's a little bit lower than I expected him to be, but like he's a guy who I think could be a little bit higher. But okay, in terms of guys that are outside of the lottery that I think would be interesting to keep an eye out on. Jordan Hawkins out of UConn, 6'5" wing, plays with a lot of heart, got a little bit of a three ball to him. They had a very, very crazy NCAA run. Jordan Hawkins was the heart and soul of the crazy tourney appearance for the UConn Huskies this past season. Another guy who comes up for me is Dariq Whitehead, almost 6'7". The dude's got a three ball, and he was playing with a messed up foot for most of the season last year with Duke. For a guy who shot 40% with a messed up foot, I think there's a lot of potential there as a knockdown three-point shooter. There's still a lot of other things I think he can build upon, but I think if he can come in the league and be a 36 to 38% three-point shooter for a team, that could be huge. I also think he needs to just play on a team where he can explore the studio space. Tankathon has a mock 26 to the Indiana Pacers. I think that's a very interesting space for him, especially because I don't know how much longer Buddy Hield is going to be on this team. So I think there's a world where, especially at the guard position, there's going to be a lot more playing time that slowly but surely starts to open up in Indiana. So I really like him there. And then the last guy that I was kind of keeping an eye out on is a dude who kind of got a lot of buzz at the beginning of the draft cycle, but it's kind of slowly fallen out of favor. That's Gigi Jackson out of South
Yeah.
Carolina.
Yeah.
6'9" big man, a lot of raw stuff by going to South Carolina. He kind of was allowed to explore the studio space as a dude who kind of was allowed to mess up, was kind of unable to really show off like things that are NBA translatable outside of his athleticism, which I would say is above average at best, but nothing that kind of pops up off the page. But there's a lot of raw tools there for Gigi, which is what makes him really intriguing. A lot of people kept joking that Gigi Jackson's reclassification is kind of what's hurt him the most in this conversation, because if he were to be in next year's draft, the 2024 draft that everybody says is going to be kind of weak, he'd be undeniably the number one overall pick. But I also don't think that's really any kind of like big ups to him. You're going to be the number one overall pick in a bad draft. It's not really, great. So I think it'll be interesting to see where he's taken. Ironically, again, he is mock 32 on Tankathon to said Indiana Pacers, another team that has a pretty decent gluttony of big men. There's a handful of guys I think they can move off of, but there's also a handful of dudes like Miles Turner, like Isaiah Jackson that they already have. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of playing time he gets. He could definitely be a guy who I think for Indiana would see a lot of G League time early, but he's a great developmental project. And if you can get him in the second round for like a team like Indiana or even like the Spurs at 33, he's a good developmental project that if he pops, he could be like a really good asset at the big man spot for a lot of these rebuilding teams. So those are just three guys that I'm really intrigued by. There's a handful of other guys I've been looking at, but those are just three dudes that I really want to see where they land tomorrow night.
Yeah. I mean, like, those are definitely some good picks. I've heard, especially, Gigi Jackson is someone I've definitely like heard of, and just like his like raw abilities, that can be like that can like maybe shoot him off the draft. He's also the youngest player in the draft as well. I think he's like he's the youngest player as well. So teams like that, like having someone who's super young, super raw, just so they can like help develop them in the skills that they need for their team. So I could see, honestly, someone even taking a chance on him like earlier on in the draft. I mean, you talked about how he could be like early second round. I feel like he's that type of player that can like, I don't want to call it like Giannis, because it's not going to be like Giannis, but I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like someone who was kind of like earlier on, like who was predicted to go later, but has the tools, has that sort of like build that teams like, and who are willing to take him a chance like in like the mid to late first round. So that's someone like I'm going to be looking out for, Gigi Jackson as well. And of course, check out these other guys that Jay has mentioned, because I mean, everyone's talking about the top 10 picks and like the guys in the lottery, but these are some guys you should definitely be looking out for. Before we move on, I just want to say, Raptors, don't be afraid to go with a nice young guard to help out this team. If Cason Wallace is there at 13, please do take him. I would love that.
Yeah, shout out to the Raptors. I think the Raptors are in a really prime position to do some pretty interesting stuff at that spot. Bilal Coulibaly that played next to Victor Wembanyama with the Metropolitan 90 on 92. That's an interesting spot at the small forward. That would ironically be more of the Toronto typical pick, but I
No,
do
I
think,
exactly. No, I've heard of
yeah,
this guy. I've heard of this guy, and then like I was looking into him. I'm like, no. He's too much like our other guys.
yeah.
This is Masai's. It's like Masai's with dream all over again. Give
Yeah, he
us Casey Wallace,
ironically
bro. Give us
fits
Casey Wallace.
exactly what you guys are trying to do. I think that Cason Wallace, I even like Kobe Buffkin as a combo guard, and he's
I don't
been
mind him either.
shooting up boards as a guy that's been in real conversation. Kobe Buffkin and Cason Wallace will be really interesting picks here. TV, the guy that I want everybody to pay the most attention to in the lottery space. This is me personally. There's two guys in the lottery space that I have my eye out on. Taylor Hendricks, power forward out of UCF. He is a dude with a ton of raw ability at the big man spot. He's a set four man. This is a guy that has a lot of like he has a ton of like Miles Turner level upside at the four position, but I think he has a lot of defensive instincts that kind of give him Jonathan Isaac vibes, but obviously without the injury concerns. Taylor Hendricks has low key become one of my favorite prospects because he reminds me so much of Jonathan Isaac defensively. And you know how I feel about Jonathan Isaac.
Yes.
Obviously, I'm off the bandwagon now because like the injuries have just been too much. But
Yeah.
hey, I get a replacement here. And then the second guy is Anthony Black. Honestly, look,
I like
dude.
him. I like him.
Look, dude. Anthony Black is gonna be a defensive menace at the guard position. I think he can play on ball, off ball. I would have loved it if the Bulls were able to keep their pick in the top 10 and be able to grab a guy like this, especially with the fact that we know that we need so much help at the point guard position and we're going to be without Lonzo Ball this year. That's a dude that I can't wait to see where he lands. Watch out for Utah, by the way. Utah has a pretty decent amount of like picks here. And if Utah can pair some of these up to kind of move around, they could be kind of active in the draft market in terms of being able to do some real stuff in the first round. Those are just a bunch of different random things
Yeah.
that kind of came to my mind in terms of tomorrow's draft. But yeah, Taylor Hendricks, Anthony Black, those are two guys that from a skill set standpoint, I think they fit in the NBA right away. They have at least one skill that I think would translate right out the gate.
Yeah.
I like both of those guys in terms of early round guys too.
Yeah. Yeah. Excited to see those guys as well. Let us know down below like who are some of the guys that not a lot of people are talking about, but who you're looking out for in this draft and where they end up. Let's move on to the final portion of this episode. And of course, we've got the draft and the quiz. And we're going to start off with the draft, of course. And Jay, we have been talking about the third pick a lot in this draft. And I mean a lot.
Yep.
This has been like this is like the most talked about third overall pick I feel like in like a long time. But and for today's draft, we're gonna have some fun with this. We're gonna try and draft the best starting five possible of number 3 overall picks in NBA history. But of course, on this podcast, you're always gonna have a catch with this. We didn't want to make it too easy because there's way too many great players at the number 3 position. So the way we're gonna do it is we're gonna go to the 4 decades: 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, and 2010s. We're gonna pick at least one player from each decade to fill out our roster, and then we have a wild card to double dip in one of the other decades into the decade as well if we want to do any repeats. Jay, how you feeling about this draft?
Yeah, man, I'm actually enjoying this one. We talked about this right before we hop on the podcast because we both agree that the number 3 overall pick has been something that's come up, not even just on this episode, but we've brought up the Portland Trailblazers and their future a ton over the last couple of weeks just because of all the Damian Lillard news that's been going on. So now to really take a look at it, we were talking about it before the show started. You could build a starting five just within each decade out of this third overall pick. This is a great spot to pick from. This is another reason why the Portland Trailblazers are in such a tough position because this is a great place to draft from, which also means it's a great asset as a trade asset as well. So, man, hey, look, this list that you sent me is only further proof that Portland is in a really tough predicament here.
Yeah, 100%. again, and also for the wildcard pick, if you want to, there's some guys in the 2020s who are pretty damn good as well. So if you want to go that route, go that route. But man, I think we have some really good players that we don't even have to go to the 2020s that we have to go with. But of course, with all of these drafts, we're doing it serpentine style. That means Jay gets the first pick, I get the next two, he gets the next two, and so on and so forth. Which means Jay, we're throwing it over to you with the first pick. Which ticket are you going to? Who is the first pick of the number 3 pick draft? That sounded really weird, but yeah, what is your first it's number 3 pick draft?
Come on, man. Resident Bulls fan. We're reaching
Yeah,
out. We're reaching out to 1984.
yeah,
Michael Jordan at the 2 guard position. Easy one.
yeah, yeah.
Easy.
That was expected. That was expected. That was expected. I wasn't expecting anything less. So yeah, Michael Jordan's off the board. He's going to the Bulls fan. That is fantastic. Kind of early. This guy could be the next GOAT. I swear I do this on multiple drafts at this point. Give me Luka Doncic as my first overall pick.
That's Stevie's go-to response, bro.
Yo, Luka is like never leaving my. I'm sorry. Each of these drafts, Luka is like it's like being like drawn to my team. And look, Luka. Look, I mean, it's like it's not by accident. You have goat potential status, man. You do. So he's gonna be my first pick of the number 3 overall pick draft. That means my 2010's gone. Jay, you want to make it interesting? You want to make our wild card pick like last, like completely last?
Yeah, let's make the wild card completely last.
Yeah, let's leave that completely last. All right. That means I get my second pick here. Where do I want to go? You know what? Let's just go pure, and I mean pure shot creation over here. Gonna head over to the 2000s. Give me the last pick, the last guy who got chosen number 3 in the 2000s. Give me the beard, James Harden. To run, that backwards gonna be nasty.
My gosh. That is a nasty backcourt right there, though. Golly.
Yeah.
All right. Here's what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
So in the 2000s, we got to get the big Spaniard, man. We got to get Pau Gasol.
Yeah.
Got to get Pau Gasol in the 2000s. So we're gonna start with that, and then my other pick. I'm gonna go ahead and get my 2010s out the way.
Yeah.
And I think, oh man, I think I gotta go Jason Tatum here. I gotta go
Jason Tatum. Respect that. Jason Tatum there for your 2010s pick. Jordan, Tatum, and Pau Gasol. Jesus, man, that is a damn good lineup so far. Oh, I got all the 2000s out the way, so I got my 90s pick and my 80s pick up next. Let's go over to the 90s. My team is all about versatility, and I'm gonna be sticking to that with this pick. I have my backcourt already. Let's get another guy who can just facilitate, who could do so much from the wing position. And remember, when we get these guys, we're getting the prime version of these guys. Give me Grant Hill.
Oh, that's
prime Grant Hill. We have triple doubles out the wazoo with this team. Harden, Doncic, and Grant Hill. You have the shooting ability of Harden and Doncic too. This team is looking nice so far. And then in the 80s pick, I'm going to need a big man to help out here. This guy can play the 4 or the 5, but this guy's probably one of the best forwards in NBA history. Give me Kevin McHale.
Yeah.
One of the best post players in NBA history. The running mate to Larry Bird. He is going to be my guy for the 80s. Jay, you got your wild card pick now.
I got the 1990s too.
Oh, and you got the 90s. Oh, yeah. So you got the 90s and you got your wild card pick back to back.
So I think, oh man. I think with the 90s, I got to go Penny Hardaway here.
Like that. Very much like that pick.
And then for the wild card, oh man, I need a big that can hang. Gasol is there, but I need a big that can hang. Cause oh man, cause getting Kevin McHale was goated low key. Oh man. I gotta get Joel. If I'm gonna double dip, I gotta get Joel.
No.
Yeah. I mean, defensive upside, obviously a walking 30. There's a lot of offense on this team. I got to admit, there's not a ton of spacing. I will admit that. TV, before you go, can I admit that there were 2 guys
Who is
that
your other
caught
guy,
my eye
man?
that I wanted to pick just as like it's just reminiscence guys for me.
What?
Two dudes that I had an eye out on where if I weren't just trying to beat your lineup and I was just picking like guys that I really were intrigued by, Darren Williams was
Oh
definitely on
yeah.
the list here. And
For
then
sure.
another guy that I really liked, again, because we're talking prime, really would have messed with either Sharif Abdul-Rahim or Jerry Stackhouse. Those three
One.
guys, if we were going strictly off of just entertainment, those are three guys that I definitely think would have gotten a lot more consideration than I already gave.
Yeah, that's tough, man. I was really hoping you were gonna move off Joel Embiid. I was gonna make a joke too about the best center to be drafted by the 76ers at the third pick. I believed in him since day one. I was gonna say some joke about Jahlil Okafor, and then you've completely ruined that. Damn it. You completely ruined that. All right. Now what do I go here? I don't have any more jokes available now, huh? I'm not. I'm gonna go with so many great players, man. So many great players still available. Give me. You know what? I'm gonna go small. You're talking about your team's all offense. My team's gonna be all offense. Give me the guy who just retired, the real Melo. Give me Carmelo Anthony to be my wild card pick, double dipping in the 2000s. It would be tough, man, to not put Carmelo Anthony on this team. I am gonna outscore you to death with this lineup.
Yeah, that was another wild card guy. I mean, the TV like we were talking about this before we hopped on the pod, dude. There are some really solid names on here. Even if you take away some of the well-known all-stars, like I mentioned beforehand, Darren Williams, Ben Gordon, Darius Miles, Chauncey Billups, like there's still a really great group of guys. Like there's a
Chris
couple of
Jack,
different.
Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf back in
Yeah,
the
like
day.
there's a ton of different
Yeah.
starting fives that you could build out of the guys that are available here. I mean, dude, one guy that didn't get drafted was Dominique
Dominique
Wilkins.
Wilkins. I
You know what I
just saw.
mean? Like
Yeah.
there's a world where you could build a ton of different starting fives out of this. So I mean, this is something that we can. Hey man, maybe we'll joke around with this and do a couple different TikToks or something with this same thing. But dude, there's a ton of the number three overall pick, bro.
Yeah, the
That's a
talent,
prime spot.
there's so much talent there. The Adam Morrisons, the Jahlil Okafors. You got yourself the Christian Leitners, man, bro.
He found his jokes. He found his jokes.
I have to take some at some point.
Oh man.
Oh man. All right, Jay, throw it over to you. How is your lineup looking for the number 3 overall picks, the best ones of all time?
All right, man. So in terms of the construction of my lineup, I'm gonna put Penny Hardaway at the one out of the 1990s. I'm gonna put Michael Jordan out of the 1980s at the 2 spot. Jason Tatum out of the 2010s at the 3. Pau Gasol out of the 2000s at the 4. And my wild card, double dipping into the 2010s, is Joel Embiid at the center position.
Oh, that's a damn good team. I was really hoping Embiid would fall, but it was just too good not pass up and the reigning MVP. My team, man, we get buckets. We pass the ball. Just try not score us. You're not. James Harden at the 1. We got Luka Doncic at the 2. Grant Hill, of course, the prime version of Grant Hill, top 3 MVP candidate in the league. Give me him at the 3. Carmelo running the 4. And Kevin McHale's gonna have to try his best to guard Joel Embiid at the 5, but we won't talk about that because he's gonna shake him out of his boots as well. I think my team is great. How you feeling about your team?
I feel pretty solid. Like I said, I might have drafted my team more for TikTok trying to get some votes, but at the same time, I still think that even with some of the guys I left off the list, there was a lot of different great teams we could have built TV, to be
There's
real.
so many. There's so many guys who left the list, but man, yeah, the number 3 pick, man. If you got that, Trailblazers, don't mess it up. Do not mess it up. But yeah, let us know down below which team do you like better between the two of us. I think we've been like we've had some really good drafts and it's really gone back and forth. Let's just see who people think has the better draft here. Final segment of the show is of course the NBA quiz run by your boy TV. And Jay, surrounding the NBA draft, we have a bunch of new rookies coming into the NBA, but there have been very few to make an immediate impact to the point where they've been folded into the All-Star game. So, Jay, I'm going to need you to name me the last 10 rookies to have made an All-Star game. I have the list in front of me. Let's see if you can get them out of
The
here.
last 10 rookies to make the All-Star game.
Yeah.
So as
I'll give you the year that this like the cutoff is, the 1984 draft.
The 19. Okay. All right. That helps. Ooh. Okay. Jordan.
Yep, he's right there. He's number 9 here. He's like the ninth, at least like the ninth latest, I guess. So yeah, number 9 we got Jordan. Bro, these are all like crazy good players. I'm telling you, there's some crazy good players in here.
Prime jump over Akia Blake Griffin.
He's the latest one. We haven't had a rookie be an All Star since 2011, and Blake Griffin was the last
Dang.
one. This was like second year Blake Griffin because remember he got injured the first year, so he came back.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, that's right. Because
so,
yeah, that's the not so rookie of the
yeah,
year thing. Ugh.
yeah.
Yeah.
So so we have Blake as the latest one. You got Jordan at number 9.
Gotta start thinking of names that are just like dudes that I knew were like really good out the gate. Um, Shaq.
Yep, fifth. He's fifth on this list from the 1992 draft. Averaged 23 and 14 in his first season. Jesus, man.
Goodness gracious. Um,
Ah,
dang. Okay.
you're missing someone from Jordan's draft class.
Oh, what the heck? Um. Okay, I gotta. Okay. I think I'll get there. Just let me think about it real quick.
Yeah,
Oh, let's get your guy that you drafted. Grant Hill.
Grant Hill. Yep, he's on this list. He's number 4.
Were making him sound like he was LeBron before LeBron when he got
Yeah,
drafted. No way he wasn't.
yeah. So you got number 1, 4, 5, and 9. So you have another one from Jordan's draft class. You got a couple more guys from the 90s. You got one more guy in the 2000s as well. Think for the guy in the 2000s, think popularity and not basketball ability. Just someone,
Huh.
just
Think
someone who just
popularity instead of because I was actually gonna I thought like Tim Duncan would be on the list.
he is on the list too.
Oh, he is. Oh, okay, cool.
He made it in the 90s. He was the third latest guy.
Popular. Oh, is this like Yao?
It is Yao, number 2. Yeah, he got
Oh,
drafted.
okay.
Man, yo, China did this man a favor. This guy, they were voting him in every single year, injured or not.
Shout out to Andrew Wiggins in the K-pop community.
Exactly. So you're
um,
missing. So you've got 1 to 5. You've got number
yeah,
9. So you're missing 6, 7, 8, and 10.
let's think. Um, Ooh, I got a weird one because I think he was just punting everything because he didn't know how to do anything else. Is Matumbo on this list?
Yes, he is. Wow,
Yeah,
that
as
was
a
gonna be the hardest
rookie,
one for you.
dude,
Yeah,
I was
number
just watching
6.
stuff. I was watching stuff for him like literally recently, like a couple of days ago, like recently. That dude was like punting everything because it seemed like the only thing he could do his rookie year.
Yeah, 3 blocks per
Um,
game. This guy absolutely dominated in the defensive end. All these guys that you're missing, 7, 8, and 10, are
uh-huh.
all-time bigs.
They're all-time bigs. Hmm.
All of them,
Dang.
all of them are like, all like some of the best of all time.
So like Hakeem?
Hakeem, man, the guy from Jordan's draft, the number 1 overall pick, was the 10th guy on this list.
Ah, okay. We're on a heater. We're on a heater.
2 more, man. You got number 7 and number 8.
Are we at least out of the 1980s
Yeah,
now?
no, the last 2 guys are from the 80s. You got the
They're
90s
from
already
the
done.
80s. Ah,
They got
okay,
drafted.
okay.
Got drafted in the 80s.
Hmm.
2 more all-time bigs.
All right, well, at least we're past all the black and white color in terms
Yeah.
of um, hmm. I think of bigs that were just like good at. So is this like Magic?
Now Magic was like, did he make his rookie year? But he wasn't in the top 10, so he was on and he's not part of the last 10, but he did make.
Yeah, true. But yeah, that would also mean that Kareem's not in the last 10.
Yeah, 2 amazing centers, 2 like
Yeah.
amazing centers that you're missing here.
Oh, okay. 80 centers. It's like that's easy and hard. There's like a million
No,
of them.
of course. I mean, remember they were rookies in the 80s, so they basically just dominated the 90s.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Great point.
Yeah,
They dominated. Okay, like random. Okay, like Patrick Ewing.
Patrick Ewing, number 8.
Okay, okay, cool. That like random guess, but like okay. Charles Barkley's not a center. Holy
It's good.
cow. It's gonna be somebody crazy. I'm missing one, right?
Yeah, you named his teammate already, who was like further up on this list.
David Robinson.
David Robinson at
Oh
number 7.
man, I forget, dude. Yeah, that's the crazy part about the. See, that's yeah, shout out Wemby, shout
Yeah.
out Wemby, bro. There's something about that first year after getting the generational big man where they come clicking. So,
You
I
know
mean,
what? That
yeah.
is a good point. That is a good point. Yo, watch out, Wemby. If Tim Duncan made the All-Star team his first year in the league, David Robinson did that in his first year in the league. Yo, Wemby, man,
Yeah, man.
you have some
And these were
expectation.
quiet guys that were all stars too. So it wasn't like they had a bunch of media backing. It was literally just them being really good and being on the radar. Well, Victor clearly has the media attention. And if he comes out really good, oh buddy, man, we
Yeah.
might see another one. We might see another
Exactly,
one.
exactly. Fun quiz though. Fun quiz.
Yeah.
Let us know down below what you guys, if you have any other quiz suggestions or anything else you want us to do, or even just like player suggestions if we want to bring back the quiz from last week where we tried and go through the teams and Jay tries to guess that because those are fun as well. So if you have any of those suggestions, let us know down below. Jay, we have reached another fantastic episode. NBA draft is tomorrow. NBA offseason starting. What do you want to tell these beautiful people before we move forward and head on out of here?
Man, same thing as I say every week, man. We're trying to build something big time. Me and TV, we do these little powwows before every episode, and it feels like we've got something brand new coming every single time. So expect a lot more content. I'm gonna be a lot more engaged, not only on the TikTok, but on the YouTube. The YouTube is somewhere where we really want to start building. So remember to like, comment, and subscribe, as TV said at the beginning and the end of every single episode. Check us out on all the platforms per usual. Me and TV, we've had an interesting May, and TV has an even more interesting June, but we are super locked in. This off season is only the start to a bunch of really dope content that's coming. So yeah, man, like I said at the end of every single episode, we got a lot of heat coming, and as we continue to kind of get our footing, it's gonna reflect in the content that you guys see every
Yeah,
single week.
you're gonna see that pretty soon. Remember to check out all our social medias, our personal ones as well, which we should be reviving back in the summer. Check out History Free Throws podcast everywhere: Instagram, TikTok, the YouTubes, the podcasts, in Apple and Spotify. Check us all out down there. You're gonna get all the content. It's gonna be a great summer of basketball. You already know the NBA season, off season is just as good as the regular season in terms of content and news. So be on the lookout for that. But we've reached another end of an amazing episode. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you all have a fantastic day. This is TV signing out. Here's my co-host over there, Jay. Take it easy, guys. Peace.
Peace.